Twitter from Jane in South Dakota. What are the 10 things that you mentioned that's so I can be happy right now? Thank you. Yes, Jane, we're going to get there in just a minute. Let's finish our thought about wrapping up about integration, integrity, and intimacy, right? The one I have a tough time. Of course, I would forget that because they're essential, right? You know, I was just saying during the break that it's like if we don't have the tools that we need, and you talk about a toolbox in your book. It's sort of like a plane that's tethered to the ground. You're not going to take off. It's less likely. It'll take a lot more energy, a lot more force than really self-inquiring. Who are you? What do you want? And what are you willing to do about it, right? And these are the tools. These are the straightforward 40 years of experience tools that you can use to create happiness. Dr. Horowitz, wrap up that part of it and let's move into the 10 things you can do, which is, I know, difficult to do in a word or 500 words or less.
Okay. The question a person listening to the program might have, why is the last chapter on the 10 things? And it's because the line of the book is self-developmental and through stress mastery. And so as the book goes on, the lessons get a little harder to do. Mm. So in the 9th chapter, I'm dealing with really the hardest things to bear. Illness, death, loss, and how to master those. Didn't seem like a good way to end the book. Because the book's on happiness, thank you. And so I'm fine.
Okay.
The 10 things are not like unique brainstorms of inspiration. They're distilled from 20 years of research in the field of psychology on positive psychology surveys. What are the things that make people around the world happy, the fairly ordinary things? And the reason they're at the end of the book is because I've discussed the obstacles to doing these.
Right.
And I'm using and how to get through those roadblocks. And then here's just a reminder, not only of the 10 things that can make some people happy some of the time, but a reminder of the obstacles you've worked through, hopefully.
Right, and you yourself have worked through many obstacles. One that comes to mind is the story about how you and your wife got the news that she was ill.
Yeah.
And you maintained, which is what I love about people who teach and actually live the work that they teach. You illustrate beautifully how incredibly difficult it is, A, to even receive that diagnosis, and yet to find joy in the journey. Talk a little bit about that, and then we're going to talk about the 10 things that you can do.
Well, as your listeners can imagine, the diagnosis was of a metastatic cancer, and it was not going to be cured. It was going to be ameliorated, and we're going to have to live through it. And her prognosis was 6 months. She lived 2 years and 6 months, but that was not a time lacking in grimness, pain, and suffering and sorrow, but it was a time that we were very intimate together and had always been, and took it on together and maintained our happiness, in that case one of the 10 things, in enjoying the flow of generations. So we very much enjoyed our grandkids. And 2 or 3 days before she died, we went out shopping for presents for the grandkids.
Beautiful story in the book, folks.
And it's like carpe diem. We only have a diem to seize, and you need to take it without denial of what's actually happening.
Yeah, and I bring that up, not to be macabre for sure, and certainly not to have you revisit anything that was painful in your past, except to say there's a lot of folks out there right now who are suffering, no doubt. I hear from many of them. They send me emails. I know many of them personally, going through some really, really tough things. A lot of death, a lot of cancer happening, people losing their jobs, their homes, their scholarship money for their kids, their retirement funds, all kinds of things. And what I'm wanting to point out is that it is possible. It's absolutely possible amidst the trauma and the tribulations and trials that we apply some of these principles, we can more readily thrive, or thriving is more available to us versus getting swallowed up in some of the drama.
Right.
And real life trauma, and as you said, grief and suffering and loss, and all of those things that are real. Thank you for sharing that story. It's a very touching story, folks. Pick up a copy of the book, A Course in Happiness, online today. Let's talk about, so folks can walk away with some things that, as you said, the survey says, these 10 things will make you happy. What are the top 3 that you want to share with folks right now listening?
Well, I think I just mentioned one, enjoying the flow of generations, both the generations before you and the generations after, and enjoying accomplishments. Of course, enjoy your own accomplishments. The obstacle to that is that they weren't as wonderful as you, as an adolescent, thought they would be. And so, but earlier in the book, you've already worked that out, so now you can enjoy your accomplishments. Another one is enjoying the accomplishments of other people. The obstacle to that is envy. And so the mastery of envy allows you to enjoy, well, Beethoven wrote the sonata, isn't that a great one?
Mm-hmm. Let's talk to the person out there right now who has just received the bad news. You know, it's fresh. And you talk about this in the beginning of the book. It's sort of like, let's navigate our way back to some place where we can get a handle or get it together. Somebody just lost an income, for example, that they were counting on and are doing the math on for the next 10 years. Poof, gone, right? Somebody's just lost their home, their child. Let's talk to that listener out there right now.
Right. Well, remember that one of our great presidents said, the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. He was wrong. We have things to fear beyond fear itself. But we also should fear fear itself. I mean, that is, if it's, as he called it, blind, unreasoning fear, or if it's fantastically elaborated fear, then it is compounding things beyond the real fear that we need to cope with.
Yeah.
So if a person has lost an income, they're going to have to cope with how they're going to eat and protect their family and live safely, and that's the first stabilization. After that, though, then one has to assess all the facts. And the important thing in not having blind, unreasoning fear is not letting those fantasies of how dire this is remain in the closet.
That's right.
You have to confront those, and so one of the lessons in the book is the 3 scenarios method, which is, well, what's the worst thing that can happen?
That's right. It's
and
brilliant.
Then, what's the best thing that can happen? Oh, the news was wrong. Here's your pension back.
That's right. So
and,
you can get a handle on it, stop the bleeding. We'll be back in just a minute right after this break with Dr. Marty